Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Detective Fire. My name is Fire, that's what you can call me, and I hope you're okay and having a wonderful day. So for those of you who've come over from my Twitch, this content will be extremely different, and as you probably guessed by the thumbnail, in this series, in this channel, we'll be focusing on true crime, but you can always catch my Twitch streams also up on this channel. So yeah, let's get that out of the way. So, welcome! I hope you're having a good day. On this channel, we'll be discussing crimes from current crimes, past crimes, historical crime, war crime, all of those different topics. So, the first thing I would like to say is if you got little phone ears, then it's so important that you leave now. This is adult content. This is my trigger warning. This is adult content and is not suitable for little ears. So if you are young, please leave now. In this series, we'll be covering very serious topics, including murder, rape, sexual assault, child murder, child rape, necrophilia, lots of things that really aren't suitable for you. So if you are a child, please take that in mind. Just leave now. I really appreciate it. Anyhow, thank you for joining me. So the one thing I would also like to say is that this channel is not to glamorize serial killers. It is not about that, no sir. What we're going to be doing is trying to get some insight into the mind of these killers and why they do the things they do. We're going to take a look at aspects of their life. It's not about sympathy, but it's about trying to understand. So yeah, without further ado, let's get a crack-a-lack-a-lack. Okay, guys, so another thing I'd like you to remember is I don't always get the details right. If there is something I get wrong, please do let me know in the comments. Please correct me because I'm always eager to learn more. And yeah, exactly. So I don't always get it right, but I do try my best with my research. So if something is not perfect, please do let me know. I'm always interested to learn. So let's go. Okay, so today, guys, we're going to be talking about the Otaku Killer, which you probably saw in the thumbnail. So the Otaku Killer was a Japanese serial killer. The reason I chose to go with this case is probably abundant to you, but you'll understand. So yes, we're gonna talk about Sutsumo. I think I'm saying that right. Miyazaki. They murdered four little girls from 1988 to 1999. Uh, they are known as many different names, so people call them the little girl murderer, the Otaku Killer, as we just stated, the Bratman, and also Dracula. Now, the first thing we're going to do is take a look into their childhood. And as I said earlier, the reason we do this is not to condone any of their behavior, not to make excuses for them, but to try and understand how they got to where they got to, to try and understand what made them who they were. So, we can start back in 1962 on the 21st of August. From now on, guys, I'm going to call them Miyazaki because Sutsumo is hard for me to say and I worry about my pronunciation and I'd rather just be able to say it and not cause any disrespect. So, Miyazaki, like I said, was born on the 21st of August 1962. They were born as an ancestral love child between their father and sister, their elder sister, had an ancestral relationship, and Miyazaki was the product of said relationship. Now, another thing about Miyazaki is they were born with a serious deformity in their hands. It made their fingers and hands. I personally would say kind of rat-like, like long fingers, long hands. The problem was that the wrist joints, Miyazaki's wrist joints, were fused to their hand bones. Their hand joints and wrist joints were fused, which meant that they could only rotate their hand by moving their entire form out. Now, guys, stick your arm out and give this a try. I'm telling you to do this because when I was doing my research, I tried myself just to try and understand a little bit more. So try and put your arm out and try and rotate your hand, but you can't rotate just your wrist. You gotta rotate your entire forearm to be able to do it. Now, the reason I want you to try is because this is actually quite debilitating, and it's not until you do it you actually realize how debilitating it is. So yes, they had the wrist joints and hand bones were fused together, which stopped them being able to move their hands, to rotate their hands without moving their entire forearm. And the other thing to take into consideration about this is that because of this, because they looked peculiar to everybody else. They were very isolated. In Japan, uh, especially in the past, these kind of deformities were very shunned upon. You'd hide your family member or whoever it was, you'd hide them away because it was not good. In Japanese culture, it was shameful and to hide people away who have strange things with them. So, because of this, Miyazaki was not only isolated in school, but they were severely isolated at home as well. And, you know, sis- Miyazaki's sisters said that they were disgusted by him. It was very unpleasant. I can't imagine. Like, as a child, it must have been very difficult for them. And especially when they've come from this incestual relationship already, that must have made things pretty hard. And then to top it off, they're born with this deformity, and no one wants to talk to them. No one wants to be their friend. And even at home, their own family is isolating them as well. And like I said, I'm not condoning their actions because what they did is absolutely awful. But the fact that they had all this going on in their life, it's not good. It's not a good start, is it, for anybody? Okay. So as I said, they were isolated at home, they were bullied at school, and it just was not good. Another theme, this I've actually found this with quite a few Japanese serial killers, and if you know of any, please let me know. There seems to be this theme of, uh, let me find the right words. There's a theme of them having a deformity or being isolated from society, and then becoming very recluse and becoming interested in things that would people would say are not the norm, especially back then. Um, and it's quite in other cases, which I'm sure we'll cover other cases. There's always a few similar examples of this isolation, recluseness, and then doing horrible things. But I think we have to look at Japanese culture to get a real understanding of that. But I think it is a point that has to be made. And guys, I'm also curious about this. It's a bit of a strange question, but I kind of think if someone at this point in his life had stepped in and shown him some love, if they'd not isolated him so much, if there was a chance that someone had just said, everything's okay, it's okay that you've got these deformities, could things be different? I think maybe, I do. But as I said, I don't condone, they did horrible things. And although they had these problems, it is certainly not an excuse for anything that they did because what they did was horrendous. But we'll get into that. Okay, so let's move on. So there's another strange thing that happened in Mrs. Miyazaki's life, and they so as I said, they didn't have many members of their family that showed them some love. They didn't have any, they were completely isolated. But there was one member of Miyazaki's family that Miyazaki actually loved. They loved and they admired them and they were nice to Miyazaki, which made a difference. You can imagine if no one's nice to you and then one member of your family is nice to you, then, that would make a difference to you. So this person was Miyazaki's grandpa, granddad, grandpa, I don't know what you call it, whatever you call it. I would call it granddad. So it was his granddad. And unfortunately, as we do in life, we get old. Miyazaki's granddad passed away. Now, for me, when this happened, what I'm about to tell you guys, this would have been a warning sign, This would have been a warning sign. So when Miyazaki's grandfather passed away, I said grandfather, granddad, grandpa, grandfather. Okay, so when Miyazaki's granddad passed away, Miyazaki actually consumed some of his grandfather's ashes. Yes, that's right, guys. He ate them. Miyazaki ate some of his grandfather's ashes. Now, I don't know what you guys think, but me personally, I can kind of understand the madness. I mean, I'm not about to like start jumping on someone's ashes, but I do understand. So, for Miyazaki, his grandfather was the only person in his life that ever showed him any affection, ever showed him any love, and ever showed him any care. And so when he passed away, like in one sense, maybe he ate some of his grandfather's ashes to be able to always keep a piece of his grandfather with him. Like when people die in your life, it's always very sad. So I can kind of see why he'd want to keep some of his grandfather with him, because it must have been super awful. And he was like, if I eat these ashes, then I'll always be able to keep part of my grandfather. My other opinion is that, um, he was in awe of his granddad, and that whole idea of like when you consume things, you also consume their energy and their spirit and their life and their strength. And maybe Miyazaki thought if he consumed some of his grandfather, then he'd be able to keep his, you know, spirit, his strength. He'd be able to take some of what his grandfather had and put it on himself. I think that is also a possibility. So yes, for me, guys, I don't know about you, but when you found out your son's been chomping on his granddad's ashes, you'd be, for me, that'd be a warning sign. But after this, Miyazaki's behavior truly got worse and worse, and it was noted that he started to watch his elder sister shower. And again, all of these things, you know, warning signs. I don't know what you guys think, but for me, super warning signs. But I think when we discuss Miyazaki's childhood, we can truly get some insight into, what exactly was going on. Because all of these things, they're just not normal, and maybe if he'd had a different upbringing, maybe things could have been different. Okay, guys, now we're gonna have a look at the crimes that Miyazaki committed. As I said, the first crime was in 1988, and his final crime was in 1989. So in this time, he abducted four small girls from Japan. And the first one was, funnily enough, as I said, I don't know if you remember before, but Miyazaki was born on the 21st of August, and his first crime was committed on the 22nd of August, 1988. Which to me is bizarre because it's the day after his birthday. I mean, I can't get in his mindset, but tell me if you think that's weird too. The day after his birthday, Miyazaki abducted Mari Kono, who was a 4-year-old girl who was playing in her friend's house. And while she was there, I couldn't quite get from the sources, guys, whether this happened while she was at her friend's house or whether it happened on the way home from her friend's house. But either way, she was abducted while she was there. Nobody could find her, of course, because she'd been abducted, and her father contacted the police. But what had actually happened is Miyazaki had abducted Mari and taken her into his car. He took her into a wooded area, and before he actually committed the act, he sat with Mari for half an hour just before he committed what he was about to do, which to me again is very strange. I don't know whether he was nervous or what, but he just sat with her for half an hour. And then what he did is he murdered little Mary. He then had sexual relations with her corpse. He dumped her body on hills close to his home. Um, and then what is interesting, guys, is so he put their body in hills close to his home. I don't know if this interesting is the right word, but he actually, after he dumped Mary's corpse, he revisited the corpse and he took 5 months. That was the other thing. It was 5 months after he put the body there. He revisited the corpse 5 months after, and he took Mary's hands and her feet, and he cremated the rest of her. And then he sent a box with a postcard, and in the box he put the cremated remains of Mary inside, and he put her teeth in there as well. And with the box, he sent a postcard. Now, this happens more than once during this crime of Miyazaki's, but he sends a postcard to Mary's family. And the postcard reads, Mary cremated, bones investigate, prove. So he sends this postcard with those words written on it along to Mary's family. Now, I have a few opinions about this, and I'd also like to know what you guys think. Now, the words on this, as I said, are Mary, cremated, bones, investigate, prove. To me, do you think that could be a sign to tell the police about what he's just done? I'm not sure. But further on in the case, I question this again a lot, so do bear with me. But to me, that's a sign of someone saying, help me, I have done something really terrible. I need help. Of course, there is the chance that he's just proud of what he's done and he wants to tell someone, but I kind of think, that is a possibility. Anyhow, so his second crime was October 3rd, 1988. So there's like 2 months between the first crime and the second crime. And the second crime, he abducted 7-year-old Masami Yoshizawa. And she was walking on her own on a rural road, and he abducted her um, exactly like Mari. And again, he literally, there's not as much information about Masami out there, and I think it's because it's very much a rinse and repeat of what he did with Mary. Um, so he murdered her, and then he committed necrophilia, and then he took. The only difference is this time he actually took her clothes. He took Masami's clothes with him, which he didn't do the first time, but so that is the difference. Okay, so the third abduction was December 12th, 1988, and it was Erica Namba. Um, she was abducted from whilst returning from her friend's house. He kidnapped her, he took her to a car park, he made her remove all her clothes on the back seat, and then he took pictures of her. He killed her and bound her and put her clothes in a woodland area, and then he put her body adjacent to the woodland area. So like there was a car park next to the area, and he put her clothes in the woodland area and her body in the car park. I mean, I don't know what was going through his head, but that's what he did. So again, this is what happened this time. So as I said to you before, there was more than one postcard sent. He actually sent a postcard to Erica's family, but there is something very different about this postcard. So this postcard reads, Erica, cold, cough, throat, rest, death. Now, guys, you remember when I said before that um Erica was not Erica. The first postcard was trying to help. To me, he could have set the police off with what he said. He could have set her family off. It seemed like he was giving them clues, to try and help them realize what he'd done, maybe to stop himself from doing what he'd done even more. To me, it seemed like there was he was trying to help. That's what it seemed like. But this time round, Erica, cold, cough, throat, rest, death. Now, to me, guys, now please do tell me if you think I'm wrong, but to me, he wanted to let her family know that she'd suffered. That's what he wanted. He wanted to let poor Erica's family know that she'd suffered. Now, whether he was just getting cocky because he'd done this a few times now, or whatever it was, nothing in this crime tells me that he wanted to help. Nothing in this postcard. He is literally telling them that how she died and how she suffered when she died. Not just how she died, but how she suffered when she died. I don't know what you guys think, but for me, this second postcard kind of like gave me a real opinion on the first postcard. So the first postcard, I thought maybe he's insane, maybe he thinks he needs help, maybe he wants someone to catch him. But this postcard really flipped my opinion on Miyazaki completely, because I think by this postcard, he is just being an asshole. Like, he is wanting them to know what exactly he has done. And obviously, he's a very sick man, but I think this really did change my opinion. Please let me know what you guys think. But yeah, it was a lot for me, that one. Like, he just wanted to show her family the torment she'd been through, and for me, like, to me, that shows me that he was proud of what he was doing. That shows me that he was sick. Okay, guys, so the next abduction was on the 6th of June, 1989. So we're in the next year now. And this was a 5-year-old girl called Ayako Nomoto. And Miyazaki convinced her to let him take pictures of her. And after this, he led her to his car. He murdered her. He covered her up with a bed sheet and put her in the trunk of his car. After he took her corpse home, he committed necrophilia again. And this time he actually filmed all of it. He took pictures of Ayako in different positions and filmed all of it, took pictures of it. Um, After 2 days, her corpse started to decompose, as corpses do. Um, and so he played with it basically for 2 days. He'd put it all these positions, he'd filmed it, he took pictures. But after 2 days, her corpse started to decompose. And so he decided it was time to get rid of her corpse. So what he did was he kept her hands so he could cannibalize them. You remember earlier on I said he's also known as Dracula, and this is the reason. He wanted to cannibalize her hands and drink blood from her hands, which is why he's known as Dracula. And that's what he did. He kept her hands, but he took her head and torso and put them in a nearby cemetery. So guys, that was a lot. If you need a break, go and take one. Those crimes are very difficult to read, but that is what the crimes that Miyazaki committed. And we can now move on to the last try and the arrest. Okay, so before we move on, I'd just like to make this comment. We are going to move on to his last try and the arrest, but I'd just like to say before we move on that it is so important that we remember the victims of this crime. Although we are looking at the killer in particular, as I said earlier, I do not want to glamorize them. I do not condone any of their actions. And I think the true people who we need to remember in this are not only the victims, but the victims' families. And by making this video, I mean no disrespect. And I send them all the love in the world. And I'm so sorry that this happened to them. So yes, please remember the victims in this crime. Okay, now moving on. This is the last try and the arrest. The reason I call this section the last try will become abundantly clear very soon. So, on the 23rd of July, 1989, so this is only a month after the last abduction, Miyazaki did something unusual compared to the rest of his crimes. He was in a park in Haichoji, I hope I'm saying that right, in Tokyo, and he saw two sisters playing. Now, what was unusual about this is Miyazaki normally only tried to talk to one child at a time, but this time he actually went to talk to both of the sisters. And he went to try and convince both of the sisters to come with him and get in his car. But out of the two sisters, there was an elder sister and there was a younger sister. And he only managed to convince the younger sister to get in his car with him. And the older sister ran away. But the younger sister actually did get in the car with Miyazaki. Once they got in the car together, Miyazaki made her take off all of her clothes. He took off all of his clothes and he got in the back. They got in the back seat together and Miyazaki began to take photos of her. Some sources actually say, now please brace yourself, but some sources actually say that Miyazaki inserted the zoom lens of the camera into the youngest sister's vagina. Now, as this was all happening, we have to remember the older sister, and thank goodness for that older sister. Thank goodness for sisters, because the older sister, after she left the scene, actually went to see her father. She went to tell her father what had happened. And her father and the older sister then returned to the car, returned to the scene. And once they returned to the scene, of course, they found Miyazaki and the younger sister in the car doing what they were doing. The father was outraged. I mean, of course, the father was outraged. Can you imagine? The father was so outraged. He dragged Miyazaki out of the car naked. He had took all his clothes off, remember? So he dragged him out of the car naked and he began to beat him. But because he was naked, Miyazaki managed to slip away. But thankfully, although those horrendous things had just happened, the younger sister was reunited with her father and her older sister, and she got away from Miyazaki, thank goodness. So, what happened is, of course, the father phoned the police. What else would you do? He phoned the police, and they left the scene. Now, Miyazaki had fled from the scene, but he actually came back later on that day to get his car back. Now, I don't understand. I don't mean to laugh. It's not funny, but I what would possess you? Why would you go back to the crime scene to get your car? But that's what he did. Miyazaki returned to the crime scene to get his car, and I'm so glad he did, because when he got back to the car, he was arrested. He was arrested because you remember the girl's father called the police, and the police were waiting at the car for Miyazaki to return, and he did, and he was arrested there and then. So, after he was arrested, the police went to search Miyazaki's bungalow. And in his bungalow, they found, let me tell you, now this is depending on the source, but at his bungalow, they found up to 6,000 videotapes. Can you imagine 6,000 in his house? I mean, I'm glad he's been arrested, but then they get to his house and they find 6,000 videotapes. Now they include such things as hardcore horror, hardcore anime, the guinea pig films, torture pornography, and very, very sadly, they also found a video of one of his victims. You know, we talked about it earlier. They found videos and photos of all the crimes, very sadly. But he was arrested and he was now going to prison. Okay, guys, now we're going to move on to the hanging and the trial of Miyazaki. So after he was arrested, as I said, they went to his home and they found all the evidence they needed. And then, of course, he was sent to prison. His trial began on the 30th of March, 1990. Um, and throughout his trial, it was said that he was nonsensical. He made no sense about any of the things um, that were being asked of him. Another point is he claimed that the reason he had committed his crimes is because he had an alter ego. I don't know if he claims it to be an alter ego, but I think that's what it is in my head. And this alter ego was the Rat Man. As I mentioned earlier, Miyazaki is sometimes known as the Rat Man, and this was why. In his trial, he even drew the Rat Man. He said, "This Rat Man is the person that's making me kill all these little girls. It's their fault." And he just basically took no blame for it and said it was all the Rat Man, his alter ego. And like I said, he even drew the Rat Man in the trial. I did try and look for the pictures for you guys, but I couldn't find them anywhere. So Miyazaki's trial went on for a 7-year period, which is very, very long. During his trial, he was disowned by his father and mother, and also after this, his father actually committed suicide um, during the trial. Which of course is very sad. I mean, he was questionable, but it's never nice if someone passes away. But his father committed suicide during the trial. Now, the reason the trial was 7 years long, this is my opinion, and also something that happened. So, during his trial, he was assessed by 3 different court-appointed psychiatric. I can't say it. Psychiatric. Is that right? Psychiatric. You know what I mean, guys. I can't say it. Psychiatric officials. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that right, but I'm trying it. Psychiatrists. Court-appointed psychiatrists. There we go. Now, what was interesting about this is all 3 psychiatrists came back with a different report. Now, in Japan, if you're seen as feeble-minded or not of an unstable mind, you can have a lesser sentence or even no sentence at all, because you can't stand for trial if you're not in a good sense of mind. But what was interesting is all different 3 psychiatrists came back with a different report. Now, one of the psychiatrists said that they believe Miyazaki has a personality disorder. Another one of the psychiatrists said they thought he was schizophrenic. And the 3rd psychiatrist said they did think he had personality disorder, but they thought he was more than aware of right and wrong and he knew exactly what he was doing. So for a long time this was argued whether he was sound of mind, whether he was able to stand trial, but eventually he was sentenced to death by Tokyo District Court in 1997. Now, as I said, the trial began in 1990, and in 1997 he was finally sentenced to death. Now, an interesting point about the trial is, and I quote, this is what Miyazaki said, He refused to apologize for any of the crimes that he'd committed, and he actually described the murders as an act of benevolence. He said that what he had done was an act of benevolence, which, yes, he also seemed to be proud of what he had done, and as I said, he said it was an act of benevolence. So, on 1997, he was sentenced to death by Tokyo District Court, and this decision was upheld in 2001 by Tokyo High Court, and it was also upheld by the Supreme Court of Justice on January 17, 2006. In 2008, his death warrant was signed, and the reason this took so long was because in Japan, I'll give you guys a bit of sources on this if you check in the comments. Actually, guys, sources for everything will be in the comments, so definitely go and have a look down there. Um, but in Japan, when you're placed on death row, I don't know if you know this, but what happens is you're placed on death row and you're not actually told about the time of your death. So you could be waiting years, you could be waiting months, you could be waiting a week, and you're not actually told until an hour before you die when you're going to die. So although he was sentenced to death in 1997, he wasn't actually hung until 2008. So I want to say, yes, 2008, and that is why. Okay, guys, so in this section of the video, we're going to move on to a new section. New section? We're going to move on to the section I like to call interesting points. And in this part of the video, it's a time for us to be able to discuss the case and have our opinions. Now, of course, guys, these are only my opinions, and you might not agree with everything I say, but if you don't, let me know in the comments. Let me know your opinion, because I'd be very interested to know. But they're just parts of the case that we picked up on that I thought, yes, that's very interesting. We need to talk more about it. So let's jump in. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you guys about are the guinea pig films. Now, first of all, have you watched the guinea pig films? Let me know. Have you? I have not. I have not. I am an avid horror fan. I am a big, big horror fan. But I'm not big on exploitation films, you know. I'm not big on exploitation films. Although I have watched reviews and clips and stuff like that of the guinea pig films just for this case to try and get some understanding. Now, back in the 1980s and 90s, the guinea pig films were very controversial. And the reason we're talking about this in this case is because, as I said before, when they were looking through the tapes that they found at Miyazaki's home, they found one of the guinea pig films. Now, to give you a bit of insight into these films, in 1991, American actor Charlie Sheen watched the second guinea pig film, and he was so convinced that it was a real snuff film that he actually informed the authorities. Now, for those of you who have seen them, they're not real snuff films. They are just films. They were filmed in a studio with actors. They are just films. In my personal opinion, from their reputation, I was expecting them to be really, really bad. But from what I've seen, to me at least, I am very desensitized, but to me at least, they didn't seem that bad. But I can imagine in the 90s and 80s, it was a lot for people to take in. So when they found these films in Miyazaki's home, they of course thought there was a connection. They thought, could this have been the reason why he committed the crimes he did? Now, I thought that was very interesting, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a further section in this section. And you guys can tell me what you think as well. Please do tell me if you think the guinea pig films are really bad, and maybe, and bit of a side note, but if you think I should give them a watch, you can also let me know about that as well. Okay, guys, so the second interesting point I wanted to talk about was the Rat Man, which I briefly touched upon in the trial. So Miyazaki had an alter ego. That's what I'd call it anyway. But he said he was so overcome and possessed by this rat man that the rat man made Miyazaki kill the children. Now, what interests me, now tell me if you think this is not very nice. I apologize if it's not. But I think Miyazaki's deformities looked like rat, like his hands. I think they look like rat hands. I mean, I used to have rats as pets and I think they're adorable, but they have long fingers and long claws, and I think there was a resemblance of that in Miyazaki's hands. Now, do you think that because of that resemblance, that's why he went for the rat man? Do you think there is a resemblance? Let me know. But do you think that's what it was? Or do you think it was just a coincidence? Do you think he was making up this alter ego and able to take the guilt off himself and put it onto something else? And the rat hens, rat men thing was just an absolute coincidence. I wish I could have found the pictures of the drawing for you guys, but I couldn't find it anywhere. But like I said, do you think it was a coincidence? Or do you think that's where the alter ego came from? Was it just for the blame, or do you think the long fingers, long hands made him think that they looked like a rat hands, and that was it? Let me know what you think in the comments again. So the third thing I want to touch on is Miyazaki's connection with children. As you know, all of his victims were children, young girls. And do you think, now I want to go back to what he said in court. You know, in court where he said he believed what he did was an act of benevolence. Now, when we think about Miyazaki's childhood, he really struggled as he was isolated, he was shunned, he was turned away from society. Do you think that he thought that, and I say this from his statement about benevolence, do you think he thought he was doing these little girls a favor? Do you think about he thought about his own childhood, his loneliness, his sadness, his just isolation? Do you think he thought he needed to take the children away from that? Do you think he thought he was being kind? I mean, first of all, I'm not condoning what he did. It was twisted, it was sick, and it was horrible. But the statement of benevolence really made me think, like, what was he thinking when he said this? Why would you come to, Again, let me know. So finally, guys, I want to talk to you about otaku culture. So if you're watching this video and you don't know what otaku culture is, I would be very surprised. But just in case, I'll let you know. So, otaku culture, otaku is the word in Japan used to describe nerd. So, like in Western culture, we have nerd culture. Well, in Japan, they have otaku culture. And it's the same thing, really, to be honest. But it's for somebody, well, I don't know. I think it's who likes nerdy things. So, like anime, manga, and all those kinds of things, you're branded an otaku. But in the 80s and 90s, otaku culture was not accepted. It has come a long way today. You can probably tell from this video. But in the 80s and 90s, otaku culture was just not accepted in Japan. And Miyazaki, as we said earlier, with the guinea pig films, the horror films, he also had a huge interest in anime and manga. And all of these things were blamed for Miyazaki's crimes. They said that as already otaku culture was already very scrutinized in Japanese culture, but Miyazaki's case actually furthered this. It furthered the idea that anime and manga was bad for you and horror films were bad for you. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but hands up, who likes horror? Who likes manga? Who likes anime? Are we all out there killing people? People? I can't speak. Are we all out there killing people? No, sir, we're not. I mean, if you are, stop it. Right now, it's not good. But we're not. That's the reality. We're not out there killing people. So how can you blame? It's like in the West, guys, the whole argument about video games causing violence. I am a streamer. I play video games all the time. Some of them are very violent. I am not violent at all. Just gonna put that out there. I do not think they do. But I'd like to know what you guys think. So because of this, otaku culture was even further shunned in society because of Miyazaki's crimes. Now, guys, the last thing I want to touch on is still a part of this section. But we remember in Miyazaki's childhood how he was shunned for his deformities and he bullied and isolated X, Y, and Z. And then, can you imagine after that, he was also shunned for his interests. So he was shunned because he liked anime. He was shunned because he liked manga. He was shunned. And what I'd like to put to you guys as my final thought is if we were more accepting as society, if society was more accepting of Miyazaki, do you think we could have seen a different man? That's what I'd like to know. Do you think? Because I think if someone had shown him some love and not shunned him for what he was interested in, and not shunned him for the way he looked, could we have had a different man? Should we shun people because they have different interests to us? In my opinion, no, we should not. No, we should not. And we should love everybody no matter what they look like. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a big cringe, but it's the truth. You know? we've got to value people as humans, no matter what. But yeah, I'd like to know, do you think if people had stepped in, we might have seen a different man, a different story, and these people wouldn't have lost their lives? I mean, it's obvious that he was a very sick man, but I don't think one, it's acceptable to blame media for things people do, because lots of people watch those things and don't do any crazy stuff. Uh, and do you think if someone could have stepped in, if someone would have shown him a little love, give it a little love and it all comes back to you and all that, do you think that we'd have seen a different story? Do you think we'd have seen a different man? Anyway, let me know in the comments. Okay, guys, if you did enjoy this video, which I hope you did, I hope you really enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a like and subscribe and turn the notification bell on. Bill? Turn the bill. Turn the notification bell on. And thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. If this was a lot for you and it was a bit of doom and gloom, please feel free to check out my streaming videos, or you can even join me on Twitch. I stream on Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 7 p.m. BST. The content is very different. We have a lot of fun, and we'd love for you to join us there. And it's a lot more lighthearted, so you might, if you did get doom and gloom from this, it might cheer you up. So again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have the most wonderful day. I'll be bringing you these videos every other Tuesday. And so it won't be this Tuesday coming, but it'll be the Tuesday after. So thank you so much. I hope you have the best week. Stay safe out there. And yeah, thank you. Have a good day. Bye, guys.